He wakes up, and the room is silent. No vibration on the nightstand, no messages waiting, no footsteps in the hallway, just the hollow rhythm of his own breathing. The light cuts through the window like a blade, cold, sharp, indifferent. There's no good morning, no reason to rise except himself. And in that silence, something stirs, not a thought, but a presence, a tension in the chest, a question, not spoken, but felt. Do I matter? If no one sees me, the silence doesn't answer, it only echoes. In that moment, most men flinch. They grab their phone, text someone they shouldn't, scroll until the ache is numbed. Not because they need company, but because they fear irrelevance. We live in a world that worships connection but fears solitude, where being alone is a red flag, not a rite of passage, where a man's value is measured in likes, in invitations, in names on a screen. But here's the paradox. No one dares to say aloud, the longer a man is single, the more dangerous he becomes. Not to others, but to the systems that thrive on his dependency. A man who learns to be alone, a man who chooses stillness over noise, is a man no longer controlled by approval, by lust, by fear. This is not a story of loneliness. It is the beginning of awakening, the kind that happens not in the light, but in the dark. When no one is watching, when there's no one left to perform for. So here's the real question. What happens to a man when he stops being needed and starts becoming? Most men don't fear solitude. They fear what solitude exposes, not the absence of others, but the unfiltered presence of self. Because when the noise dies down, when there are no messages, no dates, no duties to hide behind, what's left is terrifying in its simplicity. You, raw, unmasked, unfinished. And the truth is, very few men are ready to meet that version of themselves. We are raised to perform. From childhood, a boy learns quickly, be liked, be useful, be entertaining, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be worthy. He becomes a mirror for others, shaping himself to fit into rooms that don't fit him. A woman smiles, he adapts. A boss frowns, he folds. A friend doubts, he doubts himself too. He becomes a puppet of approval, yanked by invisible strings, and each time he adjusts, he trades a piece of himself for belonging, until one day he forgets what he looked like before the mask. So when that man finds himself alone, truly alone, the mask starts to melt, and beneath it isn't peace. It's pain, stored in silence, unprocessed heartbreaks, unforgiven failures, dreams that were sacrificed on altars of survival. And yet, this is where philosophy begins, not in books, not in quotes, but in the confrontation between man and mirror. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can you master what you've spent your life avoiding? How can you lead if you've never sat in the quiet and asked yourself, what do I even believe? Solitude forces the question. In a world that preaches constant motion, the still man is revolutionary. He stops, he listens, and he begins to realize most of what he's been chasing was never even his. The career path chosen by fear, the relationships driven by loneliness, not love. The habits inherited, imitated, programmed. What Stoicism teaches and what modern society desperately hides is that peace does not come from abundance. It comes from alignment, from shedding the layers that were never yours to begin with. But this shedding, it's not clean. It's violent. It's the kind of inner war that doesn't bleed, but scars. Because to live without distraction is to remember everything you tried to forget, to face every version of yourself that failed, that lied, that broke. Most men escape this by staying busy, busy with work, busy with women, busy with noise. They don't grow, they orbit like satellites, circling a version of themselves they're too afraid to land on. But silence? Silence is gravity. It pulls you inward, it slows your orbit, and if you let it, it crashes you into the truth. And here's the truth most never admit. The man who cannot sit in silence is a slave, a slave to attention, to praise, to the illusion of relevance. He'll never say it out loud, but he fears being forgotten more than death. Because in a world built on validation, obscurity feels like erasure. And that's the hidden problem. Not loneliness, not singleness, but the addiction to being seen before becoming someone worth seeing. A stoic man, he doesn't chase being noticed. He builds something inside that demands attention, not through volume, but through gravity. He becomes unignorable by becoming undistracted. So when the average man reaches for his phone at 6 a.m. to check if she replied, the stoic man sits, he breathes, and he listens, not to her, not to the world, but to the stillness within. That's not weakness. That's a different kind of strength, one that doesn't come from noise, but from silence, endured and survived. Most philosophies teach how to live. Stoicism teaches how to endure. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unshaken, unowned, unbroken. And for a man to reach that state, he must pass through the fire of solitude. He must sit in the quiet long enough to hear the voices he's ignored and decide once and for all which ones are his. This is the crucible of masculinity, not lifting weights, not making money, but standing alone and still feeling whole. That is why the longer a man is single, truly single, the more formidable he becomes. Because in a world built to distract him, he learns how to focus. Because in a culture that feeds him false needs, he learns how to want less and become more. And because everyone else is running, his stillness becomes power. When a man dares to stay in solitude, something in him begins to mutate, not into someone colder, but into someone clearer, not distant, but disciplined, not isolated, but intentional. And that shift doesn't go unnoticed. The world around him starts to respond differently. People pull away. Friends stop checking in. Women sense a stillness they can't manipulate because suddenly he's not dancing for attention. He's not chasing approval. He's not apologizing for his standards. And that terrifies them. They'll call him cold, detached, arrogant. They'll say he changed, and they're right. But what they really mean is this: they can no longer control him. You see, society doesn't reward self-possession. It rewards compliance, soft edges, the agreeable smile. But this man, he no longer plays that role. He speaks less, but means more. He shows up, not to impress, but to observe. And in that silence, he begins to filter people, commitments, ideas. He cuts away everything that no longer aligns, not from anger, but from clarity. And that clarity, it radiates in his walk, in his eyes, in his boundaries. He becomes the kind of man whose peace unsettles people because they don't know what to do with someone who doesn't need them. That's the cost of becoming rare. You lose the crowd, but you find your center. And once that center is anchored, there's no going back. Rebellion doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it looks like silence. A man sits at the edge of his bed, no music, no phone, no one watching. And in that moment, he chooses not to distract himself, but to face himself. That's where it begins. Not with noise, but with a refusal to chase the next quick high, the next empty message, the next meaningless validation. He doesn't post to be seen. He doesn't text just to fill the void. He doesn't say yes when his gut screams no. Instead, he pauses and he asks the questions most men never dare to. Am I doing this because I believe in it or because I want to be liked? And when the answer stings, he doesn't run from it. He sharpens from it. This is the rebellion, not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. It's waking up and choosing discipline over distraction, solitude over stimulation, purpose over performance. It's saying, I would rather be misunderstood for my truth than celebrated for my mask. And that choice, it costs. You'll lose followers. You'll be called distant. You'll feel the ache of silence. But in return, you'll gain something louder than applause, self-respect, self-command, self-trust. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away. That's the kind of power they don't teach in school. That's the kind of rebellion that rewrites a man's life. There comes a day when the silence no longer scares him. It welcomes him like a home he'd forgotten he had. And in that stillness, he no longer searches for proof that he matters. He knows, not because someone told him, but because he found himself when no one else was looking. That is the final truth. You don't become a man by being seen. You become a man by learning to see yourself, not the version others praised, not the one that begged to be loved, but the one who stood alone and didn't flinch. He doesn't need the room's approval anymore. He is the room. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses himself again and again in silence, in darkness, in truth. This man, he doesn't explain his peace. He embodies it. And without asking, the world begins to adjust to his gravity. Opportunities appear, not because he chased them, but because he became someone they're drawn to. People stay, not because he begged, but because his presence demands nothing and offers everything. And when others leave, he doesn't collapse. He remains centered, rooted, clear, because at last he understands. Solitude wasn't his enemy. It was his initiation. The longer a man is single, the more he meets himself. And when that meeting is complete, he's no longer waiting for life to begin. He's already become it.